In the world of royalty, where every smile is photographed and every gesture analyzed, danger often hides behind the most innocent moments. What seemed like a routine royal event at Windsor Castle on a crisp autumn morning would soon transform into a heart-stopping race against time, where a single observant eye and lightning-fast reflexes stood between a young prince and an unthinkable tragedy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the castle grounds as families gathered for what was supposed to be a joyful community celebration. Children laughed, cameras flashed, and security maintained their usual watchful presence. But hidden among the cheerful crowd was something that would test every protocol, every instinct, and every second of training that the Royal Protection Team had ever received. This is the untold story of how a seemingly ordinary day nearly became the darkest chapter in modern royal history, and how one guard's split-second decision changed everything. What you're about to discover will reveal the hidden world of royal security, the constant threats that lurk beneath public appearances, and the incredible lengths to which dedicated professionals go to protect those in their care. The truth behind this incident remained classified for months, known only to a select few within the highest levels of royal security. Now, for the first time, the complete story can be told, a story that begins with a child's innocent wave and ends with revelations that shocked even the most experienced protection officers in the world. The morning of October 15th began like countless others at Windsor Castle, with the familiar routine that had become second nature to the royal household staff. The autumn air carried the crisp promise of changing seasons, and the grounds buzzed with the quiet efficiency of preparations for the annual children's charity garden party. Prince Louis, now 5 years old and brimming with the boundless energy that had charmed the public since his birth, bounded through the private quarters with his characteristic enthusiasm, completely unaware that this day would forever change the way his security detail viewed their responsibilities. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Matthews had been with the Royal Protection Unit for 12 years. Long enough to develop what her colleagues called an almost supernatural sense for detecting trouble. On this particular morning, as she conducted her final security briefing with the 20-member team assigned to the event, she felt an unusual tension in the air that she couldn't quite identify. The guest list had been vetted 3 times, the grounds swept twice by bomb detection units, and every entrance monitored by both human guards and advanced surveillance systems. Yet something felt different, though she couldn't articulate exactly what. The Children's Charity Garden Party was one of the more relaxed royal events on the calendar, designed to celebrate local community achievements and raise awareness for childhood education initiatives. Unlike state dinners or official ceremonies, this gathering was deliberately informal, allowing the royal family to interact more naturally with their guests. Approximately 200 people had been invited, including families who had made significant contributions to local charities, teachers who had gone above and beyond in their communities, and children who had overcome remarkable challenges. Prince Louis had been looking forward to this event for weeks, particularly excited about the planned activities that included a small petting zoo, traditional games, and the opportunity to present awards to several young people who had shown exceptional courage or kindness in their communities. His parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, had spent considerable time preparing him for his role in the ceremony, teaching him how to shake hands properly, remember names, and ask thoughtful questions about people's achievements. The royal family's daily security routine was a carefully choreographed dance that most people never saw. Every movement was planned, every route calculated, and every potential risk assessed and minimized. For Prince Louis, this meant that even his most spontaneous moments were observed and protected by trained professionals who had dedicated their lives to ensuring his safety. The protection officers assigned to him had developed a deep understanding of his personality, his habits, and his tendency to wander off when something particularly interesting caught his attention. Detective Constable James Morrison was relatively new to the Royal Protection Team, having joined just 8 months earlier after serving with distinction in London's Metropolitan Police Counterterrorism Unit. His background in surveillance and threat assessment made him particularly valuable for events like this one, where the challenge lay not in obvious dangers, but in identifying potential threats hidden among apparently harmless activities. Morrison had spent the previous evening studying photographs and background information on every invited guest, memorizing faces, and noting any details that might prove relevant. As the morning progressed, the castle staff worked with practiced efficiency to transform the East Terrace garden into a welcoming space for the celebration. Tables were arranged to encourage mingling while maintaining clear sight lines for security personnel. Decorations were hung to create a festive atmosphere without providing concealment for potential threats, and multiple exit routes were clearly marked and kept unobstructed. The catering team, all of whom had undergone extensive background checks, prepared refreshments that would appeal to both children and adults while adhering to strict food safety protocols. Prince Louis emerged from the castle at precisely 10:30, dressed in his best navy blazer and looking every inch the young royal despite his obvious excitement. His protection officer for the day, Detective Sergeant Emma Collins, maintained her position 3 steps behind and, to his left, close enough to respond instantly to any threat, but distant enough to allow him the illusion of freedom that was so important for his psychological development. Collins had worked with Prince Louis for over 2 years and had developed an almost maternal instinct for anticipating his needs and reactions. The first guests began arriving at 11 o'clock, their cars processed through security checkpoints that had been established at both the main gate and a secondary entrance near the Long Walk. Each family was greeted by castle staff members who verified their invitations and provided brief orientations about the day's schedule and guidelines for interacting with the royal family. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, designed to put everyone at ease while maintaining the dignity appropriate for a royal residence. Among the early arrivals was the Henderson family from Reading, whose 10-year-old daughter Charlotte had raised over £5,000 for a local food bank by organizing bake sales and sponsored walks throughout her community. Charlotte's younger brother Timothy, age 7, had been battling leukemia for the past year and was attending the event during a break in his treatment schedule. The family had been looking forward to this day for months, seeing it as a bright spot in what had been an incredibly challenging year. Also arriving early was Mrs. Margaret Whitfield, a 73-year-old retired teacher who had volunteered at a literacy program for disadvantaged children for over 20 years. She was accompanied by her grandson David, age 9, who had insisted on wearing his best suit for the occasion despite his initial protests about attending what he called a fancy grown-up party. Mrs. Whitfield carried a small handmade book containing drawings and thank you notes from children she had helped learn to read, hoping to present it to Prince Louis if the opportunity arose. The security team observed each arrival with professional interest, noting body language, interactions, and any behavior that deviated from expected norms. Detective Morrison positioned himself near the main entrance, where he could observe the flow of guests while maintaining radio contact with other team members. His training had taught him to look for what he called the 70% rule. If someone's behavior seemed even slightly off, it warranted closer attention, because genuine threats often revealed themselves through subtle inconsistencies rather than obvious suspicious actions. As more families arrived, the garden began to fill with the cheerful sounds of children playing and adults engaging in animated conversations about their community work. Prince Louis moved through the gathering with natural ease, stopping to chat with various groups and showing particular interest in the stories the children had to share. His genuine curiosity and warm personality had always been one of his greatest assets in public situations, making even the most nervous guests feel comfortable in his presence. The planned activities began right on schedule, with Prince Louis participating enthusiastically in traditional games like three-legged races and ring toss. His competitive spirit and good humor when he didn't win immediately endeared him to the other children, who quickly forgot about his royal status and treated him simply as another playmate. The adults watched with obvious delight, many taking photographs and videos that would become treasured family memories. Detective Collins maintained her careful watch while allowing Prince Louis the freedom to enjoy himself naturally. She had positioned herself where she could observe not only the prince but also the reactions of people around him, looking for any signs of unusual interest or behavior. Her radio earpiece provided a constant stream of updates from other team members positioned throughout the garden, creating a comprehensive picture of everything happening within the secured area. As the morning progressed toward the planned award ceremony, the atmosphere remained relaxed and joyful. Prince Louis had successfully presented certificates to 3 young people who had demonstrated exceptional community spirit, each interaction captured by the official photographer and several media representatives who had been granted access to document the event. The royal family's commitment to recognizing and celebrating the achievements of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances was one of their most popular initiatives, and events like this one generated positive coverage that helped strengthen their connection with the public. However, as Detective Morrison would later recall in his detailed incident report, it was precisely at this moment of apparent success and normalcy that he first noticed something that would prove to be anything but routine. A movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention, something that didn't quite fit with the patterns he had been observing throughout the morning. It was subtle, barely noticeable to anyone not specifically trained to detect such anomalies, but it was enough to trigger the instincts that had been carefully honed through years of experience in high-stakes security situations. The morning that had begun so perfectly was about to take a turn that no one in the Royal Protection Team had anticipated, despite all their planning and preparation. Detective Morrison's attention was drawn to a man standing near the ornamental fountain who appeared to be taking an unusual interest in the security arrangements rather than the celebration itself. The individual, later identified as Thomas Brennan, a 42-year-old photographer from Manchester, had arrived with proper credentials as part of the media contingent authorized to cover the event. His background check had revealed nothing concerning. A freelance photographer with 15 years of experience covering royal events, no criminal record, and several published pieces in reputable magazines focusing on royal family activities. What caught Morrison's trained eye was not anything overtly suspicious about Brennan's behavior, but rather a pattern of movement that seemed inconsistent with his stated purpose. While other photographers were positioning themselves to capture the best angles of Prince Louis interacting with guests, Brennan appeared more interested in documenting the positions and routines of the security personnel. He had spent several minutes photographing areas of the garden where no royal family members were present, focusing instead on the perimeter guards and their patrol patterns. Morrison activated his radio discreetly, using the coded language that allowed security team members to communicate potential concerns without alarming nearby civilians. His message to Detective Chief Inspector Matthews was brief and professional. Possible anomalous behavior requiring assessment, Sector 7, media personnel. Within seconds, Matthews acknowledged the communication and began repositioning other team members to provide additional coverage of the area while maintaining their overall security posture. The challenge in situations like this was determining whether observed behavior represented a genuine threat or simply someone who was nervous, curious, or unfamiliar with royal event protocols. False alarms were costly in terms of resources and could unnecessarily disrupt what was meant to be an enjoyable experience for invited guests. However, the protection team's training emphasized that it was always better to investigate and find nothing than to dismiss something that could prove dangerous. Prince Louis, meanwhile, remained completely absorbed in his interactions with the children attending the event. He had struck up a particularly animated conversation with Charlotte Henderson about her fundraising efforts, asking detailed questions about how she had organized her bake sales and whether she had encountered any challenges along the way. His genuine interest in her work was evident to everyone watching, and the conversation was providing exactly the kind of heartwarming moment that made these events so valuable for both the royal family and the public. Detective Sergeant Collins maintained her position near Prince Louis while staying alert to the subtle communications coming through her earpiece. The security team's ability to respond to potential threats while maintaining the appearance of a routine, peaceful event was a skill that required constant practice and exceptional coordination. Collins had participated in dozens of training scenarios designed to test the team's ability to handle various types of emergencies without causing panic among civilians or disrupting official proceedings. As Morrison continued his discreet observation of Brennan, he noticed additional details that reinforced his initial concerns. The photographer was carrying equipment that seemed more sophisticated than what would typically be necessary for covering a charity garden party. His telephoto lenses and digital recording devices appeared designed for surveillance rather than traditional media coverage. More significantly, Morrison observed that Brennan was paying particular attention to the timing of security rotations and the communication patterns between team members. The decision to approach Brennan directly required careful consideration. Confronting someone who might be innocent could create negative publicity and potentially harm relationships between the royal family and the media. However, allowing a potential threat to continue operating freely was unacceptable when Prince Louis's safety was the primary concern. Matthews made the decision to have Morrison conduct what would appear to be a routine security check, the kind of interaction that media personnel had come to expect at royal events. Morrison approached Brennan with the casual professionalism that was characteristic of royal protection officers. His manner was friendly but authoritative, designed to gather information while avoiding any appearance of harassment or intimidation. The conversation began with standard questions about Brennan's assignment, his planned coverage of the event, and verification of his credentials. Brennan's responses were cooperative and seemed genuine, explaining that he was documenting the event for a feature article about community recognition programs supported by the royal family. However, as the conversation continued, Morrison noticed something that transformed his moderate concern into active alarm. While Brennan was explaining his work, he inadvertently revealed knowledge about the royal family's schedule and security procedures that went far beyond what would be appropriate for a freelance photographer. His comments suggested familiarity with internal protocols that were not publicly available and should not have been known to someone outside the protection team. The revelation came in what appeared to be an innocent remark about timing. When Morrison mentioned that the formal award ceremony would begin shortly, Brennan responded with a comment about how the security rotation would need to be adjusted to accommodate the movement to the ceremony location. This information was accurate, but it was also classified, known only to team members and senior palace staff. A legitimate photographer would have no reason to be aware of security rotation schedules or how they might be affected by changes in the official program. Morrison's training kicked in immediately. Without changing his demeanor or giving any indication that he had detected something concerning, he continued the conversation while simultaneously alerting his colleagues to the developing situation. The coded message he transmitted indicated that what had begun as a routine security check was now evolving into a potential threat assessment requiring immediate backup and enhanced surveillance. Detective Chief Inspector Matthews received Morrison's update while maintaining her position overlooking the entire garden area. Her mind raced through the possible implications of what Morrison had discovered. If Brennan had access to classified security information, it raised serious questions about how he had obtained it and what he intended to do with it. The possibility of insider involvement, security breaches, or planned criminal activity all had to be considered and addressed without compromising the safety of Prince Louis or the other guests. The challenge was compounded by the public nature of the event and the presence of legitimate media representatives who would be watching closely for any signs of unusual security activity. Any response had to appear routine and professional while actually representing a significant escalation in protective measures. Matthews began implementing what the team called a quiet lockdown, gradually increasing security presence and restricting movement options without making the changes obvious to observers. Prince Louis continued his participation in the planned activities, completely unaware of the developing situation. His protection officer, Detective Sergeant Collins, received updated instructions through her earpiece, but maintained her normal positioning and behavior. The prince was in the middle of presenting an award to a young girl who had organized a neighborhood cleanup project when Collins noticed something that would prove to be crucial to understanding the full scope of the threat they were facing. Among the guests, Collins observed a woman who appeared to be paying unusually close attention to the exchange between Morrison and Brennan. The woman, later identified as Rebecca Foster, had arrived as part of a family group from Oxford whose son was being recognized for his work with elderly residents in their community. Foster's behavior was subtle but noteworthy. While appearing to watch Prince Louis and the award ceremony, she was actually monitoring the security interaction taking place near the fountain. The possibility of multiple individuals working together dramatically changed the nature of the threat assessment. What might have been a single person with suspicious but potentially innocent intentions could now be a coordinated effort involving several people with unknown objectives. Collins transmitted her observations while maintaining her focus on Prince Louis, who was completely absorbed in learning about community service projects from the children he was meeting. As Morrison continued his conversation with Brennan, he began to notice additional concerning details. The photographer's equipment included devices that could potentially be used for electronic surveillance or communication interception. While such equipment might have legitimate uses for a media professional, its presence combined with Brennan's knowledge of classified security information suggested possibilities that the protection team could not ignore. The situation was further complicated by the arrival of additional guests for the later portion of the ceremony. A group of local dignitaries and their families had been scheduled to join the event at noon, expanding the number of people in the secured area and requiring adjustments to the security perimeter. The timing of their arrival coincided almost perfectly with the developing concerns about Brennan and Foster, creating additional complexity for the protection team's response. Matthews made the decision to implement enhanced security protocols while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Additional personnel were discreetly moved into position, communication frequencies were adjusted to prevent potential interception, and contingency plans for rapid evacuation were reviewed and updated. All of these measures had to be accomplished without disrupting the ceremony or causing alarm among the legitimate guests who had come to celebrate community achievements. The morning that had begun as a routine royal engagement was transforming into one of the most challenging security situations the team had faced in recent years. The presence of individuals with apparent inside knowledge of royal protection procedures represented a threat that went beyond typical security concerns and suggested the possibility of more serious criminal intent. As the situation continued to develop, every decision would need to balance the need to protect Prince Louis with the importance of avoiding panic or disruption that could harm innocent people or damage the royal family's relationship with the public. The breakthrough in understanding the true nature of the threat came from an unexpected source. Detective Constable Rachel Torres, who had been monitoring the event's perimeter security, noticed a pattern of electronic signals that was inconsistent with normal communication traffic. Torres had specialized training in electronic surveillance detection, a skill that had become increasingly important as technology evolved and potential threats became more sophisticated. The electronic anomaly Torres detected appeared to be a form of encrypted communication between multiple devices within the secured area. The signals were brief and intermittent, designed to avoid detection by standard security sweeps, but Torres's equipment was calibrated to identify exactly this type of covert communication. The timing of these transmissions coincided with movements by both Brennan and Foster, suggesting that they were indeed coordinating their activities through hidden communication devices. Detective Chief Inspector Matthews received Torres's report with growing alarm. Electronic communication between unidentified individuals at a royal event represented a serious security breach that could indicate anything from industrial espionage to planned physical harm. The use of encryption suggested sophisticated planning and resources that went far beyond what a casual opportunist would possess. Matthews immediately authorized enhanced electronic countermeasures while maintaining strict radio silence about the developing situation to prevent potential interception by the suspects. Prince Louis remained at the center of the ceremony, genuinely enjoying his interactions with the children and families who had been invited to celebrate their community contributions. His natural warmth and curiosity had created an atmosphere of relaxed celebration that made the security team's job both easier and more challenging. While his obvious happiness and engagement with the guests provided perfect cover for the protection officers' increased vigilance, it also meant that any disruption to the event would be particularly noticeable and potentially traumatic for the young participants. The award ceremony was proceeding smoothly when Detective Morrison made a discovery that transformed the situation from a security concern into an active threat response. During his continued observation of Brennan, Morrison noticed that the photographer was using what appeared to be a modified camera lens to direct some form of invisible beam toward the area where Prince Louis was standing. The device was sophisticated enough to be nearly undetectable, but Morrison's position and training allowed him to identify the telltale signs of electronic targeting equipment. The realization that Prince Louis was being actively targeted by electronic surveillance equipment triggered immediate action protocols. Morrison transmitted an emergency code that alerted every member of the security team to prepare for potential threat neutralization while maintaining their positions and avoiding any actions that might alarm the civilian guests. The code indicated that an active threat had been identified and that coordinated response measures were being implemented. Detective Sergeant Collins, upon receiving the emergency signal, began subtly repositioning herself to place additional physical barriers between Prince Louis and Brennan's position. Her movements appeared casual and natural, as if she were simply adjusting her position for better observation of the ceremony. But they actually represented carefully calculated defensive positioning designed to provide maximum protection while preserving her ability to respond quickly to various threat scenarios. The discovery of electronic targeting equipment raised serious questions about the ultimate objectives of Brennan and his apparent collaborators. The device could potentially be used for sophisticated surveillance, electronic interference with security communications, or even as a targeting system for more direct threats. The protection team's training emphasized that unknown electronic devices should always be treated as potentially lethal until proven otherwise. Matthews coordinated the response from her position overlooking the garden, where she could maintain visual contact with all suspected individuals while directing the actions of her team members. Her experience in managing complex threat situations was crucial in ensuring that the response was both effective and measured. The goal was to neutralize the potential threat while avoiding actions that could escalate the situation unnecessarily or endanger innocent bystanders. As the security team prepared to act, they received additional intelligence from Torres's electronic monitoring that revealed the true scope of what they were facing. The encrypted communications between Brennan and Foster included references to timing, positioning, and what appeared to be countdown sequences. The nature of these communications suggested that whatever was being planned was scheduled to occur during the formal conclusion of the ceremony, when Prince Louis would be most visible and predictable in his movements. The timing element added critical urgency to the situation. With approximately 15 minutes remaining before the planned conclusion of the ceremony, the security team had a narrow window to identify and neutralize the threat without disrupting the event or endangering the civilian guests. The challenge was compounded by the fact that they still did not fully understand the nature of the planned action or whether additional individuals might be involved. Prince Louis, meanwhile, was thoroughly enjoying what he considered one of the most interesting events he had attended in months. His conversation with young Charlotte Henderson about her fundraising efforts had evolved into a broader discussion about creative ways to help people in need, and several other children had joined the conversation with their own ideas and experiences. The genuine enthusiasm and generosity of spirit displayed by these young people was exactly what the royal family hoped to encourage through events like this one. Detective Morrison faced the complex challenge of getting closer to Brennan without alerting him to the fact that his activities had been detected. Morrison's approach had to appear routine and non-threatening while actually positioning him to intervene quickly if necessary. His training in close quarters threat neutralization was about to be tested in a real-world situation where the margin for error was essentially zero. The electronic surveillance detected by Torres revealed additional concerning information as the transmissions continued. References to package delivery and final approach suggested that whatever was being planned involved physical objects or actions rather than merely passive surveillance. The protection team's worst-case scenario planning had to consider possibilities ranging from photography-based harassment to actual physical attack attempts. As Morrison moved closer to Brennan's position, he observed additional details about the modified equipment the photographer was carrying. What had initially appeared to be professional camera gear included devices that seemed designed for purposes other than taking pictures. The sophistication of the modifications suggested access to specialized technical knowledge and resources that raised questions about Brennan's actual background and affiliations. Detective Collins received updated instructions to begin implementing what the team called a protective bubble around Prince Louis. This technique involved gradually increasing the physical barriers and distance between the prince and potential threats while maintaining the appearance of normal ceremony activities. Collins had practiced this maneuver countless times in training scenarios, but implementing it during an active threat situation required exceptional skill and composure. The breakthrough in understanding the suspect's intentions came when Torres's monitoring equipment intercepted a communication that included specific references to Prince Louis's scheduled movements during the ceremony's conclusion. The message contained details about his planned route from the award presentation area to the refreshment tables, information that should have been known only to senior security personnel and royal family staff members. This revelation confirmed that the threat involved someone with inside access to royal protection protocols and scheduling information. The implications were staggering. Either there was a security breach within the protection team itself, or the suspects had access to classified information through other channels. Either possibility represented a fundamental compromise of the security systems designed to protect the royal family. Matthews made the critical decision to accelerate the response timeline. The combination of electronic targeting equipment, encrypted communications, and access to classified scheduling information created a threat profile that could not be allowed to continue developing. The protection team would need to act decisively within the next few minutes to prevent whatever was being planned from reaching its intended conclusion. The ceremony continued around them as the security team prepared to confront a threat that none of their training scenarios had fully anticipated. The presence of sophisticated electronic equipment, coordinated communication between multiple suspects, and apparent inside knowledge of royal security procedures represented a challenge that would test every aspect of their professional capabilities and personal courage. The moment of truth arrived as Prince Louis prepared to present the final award of the ceremony to Timothy Henderson, the 7-year-old boy who was battling leukemia. The planned presentation was scheduled to take place at the ornamental fountain, the exact location where Detective Morrison had observed Brennan positioning his modified surveillance equipment. The convergence of these factors created what security professionals call a critical decision point, where immediate action becomes necessary to prevent potential harm. Detective Chief Inspector Matthews coordinated the final phase of the protective response from her command position. Her years of experience had taught her that successful threat neutralization required precise timing, clear communication, and absolute commitment to the planned course of action. The security team had identified at least 3 individuals who appeared to be working together, electronic equipment of unknown capability, and access to classified information that suggested a level of planning and resources that went far beyond typical security concerns. As Prince Louis walked toward the fountain area, Detective Sergeant Collins maintained her position immediately behind him while scanning the crowd for any signs of unusual movement or behavior. Her training had prepared her for situations where multiple threats might emerge simultaneously, requiring her to prioritize the protection of her charge while remaining aware of broader tactical considerations. The presence of innocent children and families throughout the garden meant that any response had to be carefully calibrated to avoid causing panic or inadvertent harm. Detective Morrison received authorization to approach Brennan directly and conduct what would appear to be a routine credential verification, but would actually be an opportunity to assess the electronic equipment at close range and potentially disable any threatening devices. Morrison's background in electronics and communications technology made him uniquely qualified to identify and neutralize sophisticated surveillance or targeting equipment without necessarily alerting other suspects to the security team's awareness of their activities. The approach required exceptional skill in maintaining normal appearances while actually executing a high-stakes security intervention. Morrison had to appear casual and professional while remaining prepared to respond instantly to any signs of hostile intent. His positioning allowed him to observe both Brennan and Foster simultaneously, while also maintaining radio contact with other team members who were monitoring additional individuals who might be involved in the suspected conspiracy. Prince Louis reached the fountain area and began the award presentation to Timothy Henderson with his characteristic warmth and genuine interest in the boy's story. The ceremony was proceeding exactly as planned, creating the perfect cover for the security team's activities while also providing the suspects with the predictable timing and positioning they appeared to be counting on for whatever they had planned. Torres's electronic monitoring detected an increase in encrypted communication activity as the ceremony reached its climax. The messages were brief but frequent, suggesting that the suspects were coordinating the final phase of their intended operation. The timing of these communications coincided precisely with Prince Louis's movements, confirming that he was indeed the focus of whatever was being planned. Morrison's direct approach to Brennan revealed the true sophistication of the threat they were facing. The modified camera equipment included devices that Torres later identified as capable of both electronic surveillance and signal jamming. The equipment was designed to interfere with radio communications while simultaneously gathering intelligence about security procedures and personnel positioning. The discovery explained how the suspects had been able to monitor security communications and coordinate their activities without detection by standard countermeasures. The confrontation between Morrison and Brennan unfolded with professional restraint despite the high stakes involved. Morrison's approach was firm but diplomatic, designed to assess Brennan's intentions while avoiding any actions that might trigger aggressive behavior or alert other suspects to the security team's awareness of their activities. The conversation revealed that Brennan's knowledge of royal security procedures was indeed the result of inside information, though the source of that information remained unclear. As Morrison engaged with Brennan, Detective Collins observed Foster beginning to move toward Prince Louis's position near the fountain. Foster's approach was subtle and appeared casual, but her timing and trajectory suggested that she was implementing a predetermined plan rather than simply moving to get a better view of the ceremony. Collins alerted other team members while beginning her own movement to intercept Foster before she could reach Prince Louis. The situation escalated when Torres's monitoring equipment detected what appeared to be an activation signal transmitted between the suspects' devices. The nature of the signal suggested that whatever they had planned was beginning to be implemented, requiring immediate intervention to prevent potential harm to Prince Louis or other guests. The security team had reached the point where continued observation was no longer possible, and active intervention became necessary. Matthews authorized the implementation of emergency protective protocols that had been designed for situations where multiple coordinated threats required simultaneous response. The protocols involved rapid repositioning of personnel, implementation of electronic countermeasures, and preparation for possible evacuation procedures if the threat level continued to escalate. All of these measures had to be executed without causing panic among the civilian guests or disrupting the ceremony more than absolutely necessary. Prince Louis completed the award presentation to Timothy Henderson with obvious pleasure, completely unaware of the complex security operation unfolding around him. His genuine happiness and the joy of the children participating in the ceremony provided a stark contrast to the tension and urgency being experienced by the protection team as they worked to neutralize what appeared to be a sophisticated and potentially dangerous security breach. The critical moment arrived when Morrison discovered that Brennan's modified equipment included what appeared to be a targeting laser designed to mark specific locations for unknown purposes. The device was not immediately threatening by itself, but its presence combined with the coordinated communication between multiple suspects suggested the possibility of additional equipment or personnel that had not yet been identified. The targeting capability raised serious questions about whether the suspects intended merely to gather intelligence or were planning more direct action. Collins successfully intercepted Foster's approach to Prince Louis by positioning herself between Foster and the fountain area. The interception was accomplished smoothly and professionally, appearing to be a routine adjustment of security positioning rather than an active threat response. Foster's reaction to being blocked provided additional confirmation that her movements were indeed part of a coordinated plan rather than innocent guest behavior. As the various elements of the security response converged, Torres detected one final electronic transmission that included what appeared to be an abort code. The message was followed by immediate changes in the behavior of all suspected individuals, suggesting that they had become aware that their activities had been detected and were beginning to withdraw from whatever they had planned. The discovery that the suspects were prepared to abandon their operation upon detection provided some reassurance that their intentions might not have been immediately violent, but it also raised questions about their ultimate objectives and whether they might attempt to implement their plan at a different time or location. The security team faced the challenge of determining whether to detain the suspects for questioning or allow them to withdraw, while maintaining surveillance to gather additional intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The ceremony concluded successfully with Prince Louis having completed all of his planned interactions with the young award recipients. His obvious enjoyment of the event and the positive response from all of the guests provided exactly the kind of memorable experience that made these community recognition programs so valuable for both the royal family and the public. The contrast between the successful public event and the hidden security drama that had unfolded simultaneously illustrated the constant vigilance required to protect members of the royal family during even the most routine public appearances. The immediate aftermath of the Children's Charity Garden Party presented Detective Chief Inspector Matthews with one of the most complex decisions of her career in royal protection. The suspects had clearly detected the security team's awareness of their activities and had begun what appeared to be an organized withdrawal from the event. The question facing Matthews was whether to detain them immediately for questioning, maintain surveillance to gather additional intelligence about their network and capabilities, or allow them to depart while implementing enhanced monitoring to prevent future threats. The decision was complicated by several factors that made each option both appealing and problematic. Immediate detention would ensure that the suspects could not attempt their operation at another time or location, but it might also alert other members of their network and prevent the security team from learning about the full scope of their capabilities and intentions. Continued surveillance might provide valuable intelligence about their methods and associates, but it would also allow potentially dangerous individuals to remain free while possessing sophisticated equipment and inside knowledge of royal security procedures. Detective Morrison's analysis of Brennan's modified equipment provided crucial information for understanding the nature of the threat they had faced. The devices were sophisticated enough to suggest professional-level technical expertise and significant financial resources, but they appeared designed primarily for surveillance and communication rather than direct physical harm. The targeting laser system was capable of marking locations with precision, but forensic analysis would later reveal that it was calibrated for photography and measurement rather than weapon guidance. The revelation that emerged from Torres's analysis of the intercepted communications was both reassuring and deeply troubling. The encrypted messages revealed that the suspect's operation was indeed focused on intelligence gathering rather than immediate physical harm to Prince Louis. However, the sophisticated nature of their surveillance capabilities and their access to classified security information suggested that they were part of a larger organization with resources and objectives that went far beyond typical criminal activity or media intrusion. Prince Louis returned to the private quarters of Windsor Castle completely unaware that anything unusual had occurred during what he considered one of the most enjoyable